Our next honoree is Wyndham Robertson, and when I was in New York City before I came here, I had an awful lot of women friends. They'd say, "Oh, you've got to meet Wyndham Robertson." I mean, I think she knows everyone in New York, everywhere I went, and she knows everyone in North Carolina, and certainly Chapel Hill. Ford Worthy, will you come up to do the honors? Ford, let me tell you a little bit about him. Lawyer and an innovator who gave up journalism for the heights of business and entrepreneurism. He was a writer and an associate editor at Fortune magazine and headed the Hong Kong bureau. Most important, perhaps, for tonight, Ford is Wyndham's neighbor.
Thank you. I'm another mentee introducing a mentor, and it's a thrill to do that. I first came face to face with Wyndham in 1969, and I remember it vividly. I was bounding down the stairs at my neighbor's house, her sister's house, and I literally crashed into this huge framed newspaper ad. I think it was the back page of the New York Times, with this photograph of this dashing, glamorous young woman with the cut line that I'll never forget: "She wrestles bulls, bears, and arbitrageurs." That magnetic young woman was, of course, Wyndham. And the ad, it was part of a campaign by Fortune magazine to show off one of its brightest stars, a woman in 1969, who by that time had established herself in the clubby, almost entirely male world of Wall Street as a writer with just an uncommon talent for explaining the most complicated of topics. And as for me, I was a 13-year-old boy, and I was smitten for life, Wyndham. Wyndham's career in journalism began in 1961, which adds up to 52 years ago for most of us, but not for Wyndham. For if you have the sort of youthful, curious, engaged sort of mindset that personifies her, 1961 was practically yesterday. When she arrived at Fortune, she was just a few years out of Hollins University, where she had earned a degree in economics. And just a footnote there, she later served Hollins for 31 years as a trustee, where the Wyndham Robertson Library is today a campus landmark. At Fortune, her first job was as a researcher reporter. That was a position that was not only the bottom of the ladder for even the most brilliant young women, but it was the top rung, too, at that time. Jobs like writing and editing, they were reserved exclusively for men. And after all, as the tagline from that ad that I mentioned put it, Fortune was, quote, "for the men in charge of change." And as the times changed, Wyndham kept adding rungs to the ladder. She began writing Fortune's hallmark personal investing column in 1967. She then branched out into doing longer, often very definitive pieces, including groundbreaking pieces, articles on the paucity of women at the very top ranks of corporate America. In 1972, she received the prestigious Loeb Achievement Award. And after Wyndham had written about something, for example, her profile of a Texas real estate tycoon named Trammell Crow, who I think later named a hotel chain after her, the Wyndham, there was just nothing new to write about a subject that she had covered for a very, very long time. In the mid-1970s, she moved into the corps of editors at Fortune, and in 1981, she became the magazine's first female assistant managing editor. Carol Loomis, a legendary Fortune editor who I had the privilege of working with as well as with Wyndham, and who's still going strong in her 80s, paints this scene of the magazine's senior editors sitting around a fancy New York conference table, and the discussion turns to a book that was apparently then the rage. Erudite conversation, spirited extolling of the book. And then Wyndham weighs in with her charming, very distinctive Southern accent. You sort of had to be there to get it. And she said, "I just don't get this book at all." Wyndham taught us to never pretend, to never fake it, to keep asking the, quote, dumb questions until you really, truly got it. And it was impossible to work with her, and it was also impossible to be an effective journalist without taking that lesson to heart. She left Fortune in 1986 when President Spangler lured her here to become the first female vice president for communications at the UNC system. She spent 10 years there, including responsibility for UNC TV. Her involvement in the broader media and financial world then expanded further to include board seats at such major public companies as Cap Cities ABC, Wachovia Bank, and others. And the good news is that the story of her career in journalism is not over. Just last year, in fact, when Warren Buffett became a major shareholder in a company called Media General, which is an old-line newspaper and TV station conglomerate that is now trying to transform itself into a modern digital media and mobile platform company. Whom did he name to the board? Well, it's my honor to introduce her, my friend and mentor, Wyndham Robertson.
Thank you, Ford. That was a lot better than I am. And thank you, my friends and family, so many of you, for being here tonight. I'd like to single out my sister, Blanche. Blanche, please wave. Because without her influence, I would have grown up to be a pathetic recluse and certainly would not be standing here. She has brought an entourage that includes her wonderful husband, a sensational daughter-in-law, and 4 incomparable direct descendants, including one named Wyndham. Raise your hand. I became a journalist because of Ida Gordner, an old maid who taught journalism in my public high school in Salisbury. She also taught Latin, which dates me, and was advisor to the Yellow Jacket, the school's bi-weekly newspaper for which I was co-editor-in-chief. Salisbury had a lot of great journalists, at least 3 of whom are in your Journalism Hall of Fame: Jimmy Hurley, Rose Post, and Bill Snyder. I knew and admired them all, and am honored to be in their company. I'm happy, too, to be the 2nd Hollins graduate inducted, the first being the pioneering female sports writer, Mary Garber. My luckiest break was to be hired at Fortune when I was 24 by the woman Ford mentioned, Carol Loomis, who became a legendary financial journalist. She was my mentor, is still a close friend, and at age 83 is now in her 60th year on the staff of Fortune, doing prize-winning work. I also had a lot of help from male colleagues at Fortune, especially the late Dan Seligman, also a mentor, who promoted me to writer, and to a former managing editor, Bill Rukeyser, who elevated me to assistant managing editor, the slot on the masthead that no woman had ever occupied, but which since then, I'm happy to say, lots of other women have. One of my other great promoters was Chuck Whittingham, who is here tonight. Chuck was associate publisher of Fortune in the golden years and had an expense account that King Tut would have killed for. Even though Chuck was state and I was church with a little match girl expense account, we sometimes collaborated to advance various Fortune interests. I was never sure if we were working or just having fun, a feeling I often had at Time Inc. And that's why it was such an awesome place to work back in the day. And thank you, Dick Spangler and Meredith, for being here tonight. Soon after Dick became president of the University of North Carolina, he invited me to Chapel Hill, and in April of 1986, took me to this very Hall of Fame dinner. Shortly thereafter, he hired me as UNC's vice president for communication. Working with Dick at our splendid university greatly enriched my life, as has my friendship with him and Meredith. And finally, a big cheer to Susan King, who brings incredible experience, intelligence, and firepower to the School of Journalism and Mass Communication. Let's face it, Susan has a lot of influence over who gets inducted. And bottom line, as they say, I owe this recognition, this humbling, thrilling recognition, mainly to her.